Okay, so how does one person make $100 billion? Like before lunch? And no, that's not some crazy hypothetical question. It just happened to Oracle's Larry Ellison. And in this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how something like that is even possible.
Yeah, that number right there, $100 billion. We're not talking about a company's valuation or some country's GDP. No, that was the record-breaking single-day gain for one guy. It is by far the biggest one-day jump for a billionaire in history, ever.
So naturally, that brings us to the main question, right? How is that even possible? I mean, it just seems to defy all logic. But as it turns out, there's a really fascinating story behind it. It's this perfect storm of a red-hot tech trend and, years and years of some very quiet, very clever financial maneuvering.
All right, let's start with the simple answer. This is the part that all the headlines were talking about, and it all kicked off with a massive, massive surge in the stock market.
So, what was the immediate trigger? Well, it was this. Oracle's stock, that's ticker symbol ORCL, it just exploded. In a single morning, it shot up by over 30%. Now, you got to understand, when you own as much of a company as Larry Ellison does, a jump like that, well, it translates into a truly astronomical gain in your personal wealth.
So why all the sudden excitement? What got investors so fired up? It really all came down to one thing, a blockbuster forecast, and it was all driven by AI. See, Oracle basically told the market, hey, get ready, because our cloud revenue is about to skyrocket. And why? Because of the absolutely insane demand for data centers to power artificial intelligence. To back it up, they even announced they just signed 4 multi-billion-dollar AI contracts. The market heard AI gold rush, and it just went wild.
And to really drive that confidence home, Ellison himself gets on the earnings call and makes this incredibly bold statement. He basically promised to outbuild all of their massive competitors. We're talking Microsoft, Amazon, Google combined. I mean, wow. That is the kind of ambition that makes Wall Street sit up and pay very close attention.
But here's the thing. A soaring stock price? Yeah, that explains a lot. But it doesn't explain everything, not even close. It's really only half the story. To really understand how this gain got so ridiculously massive, we have to pull back the curtain and look at something that's been happening behind the scenes for more than a decade.
And this is where we get to the real story. We're talking about the financial engineering that was basically a secret weapon, something that absolutely supercharged Ellison's payday. Okay, so the key concept here is something called a stock buyback. Now, on the surface, it's pretty simple. It's just when a company uses its own cash to buy its own stock from the open market. But the crucial effect, the whole point really, is that it reduces the total number of shares out there for everyone else to own. The easiest way to wrap your head around this is with a pizza analogy. Just imagine Oracle is a big pizza cut into 10 slices, okay? Now, 15 years ago, let's say Larry Ellison owned 2 of those slices. That's 20%. Simple enough. But then the company comes along and buys back or removes 5 of the other slices. Poof, they're gone. Now there are only 5 slices of pizza left. Ellison still has the same 2 slices, but now they represent 40% of the whole pizza. See? His ownership literally doubled, and he didn't have to buy a single new share.
And look, this wasn't some small, one-off thing. Oh no, this was a deliberate, long-term strategy. Since 2011, Oracle has spent a staggering $142 billion buying back its own stock. That's just incredible. It systematically just kept reducing the number of those pizza slices out there year after year after year.
And here is the direct result of all that. Check this out. 15 years ago, Ellison owned about 22% of Oracle. Today, just by holding on to his shares while the company bought back everyone else's, his ownership stake has ballooned to 41%. So here's the kicker, the crucial point. When that AI-fueled stock surge finally happened, he was getting 41% of that massive gain, not 22%. That is the multiplier. That's what turned a big day into a $100 billion day.
Okay, so we've seen how this immense fortune was created, at least on paper. But that brings up another question, right? How does that wealth translate into actual cash you can spend and influence you can wield, especially if you don't want to sell off your precious ownership stake?
Well, there are a couple of main tools the ultra-wealthy use for this. First up, dividends. Simple enough. Thanks to his massive stake, Oracle pays him over $500 million every single quarter. Just cash.
But second, and this is even more powerful, he uses his stock as collateral to get massive loans. And get this, he's the only executive at Oracle who's allowed to do this. By pledging shares worth over $90 billion, he gets access to almost unlimited cash without ever having to sell a single share.
You know, this surge was so immense that for a moment there, it actually launched Ellison to the very top of the wealth ladder. He briefly overtook Elon Musk to become the richest person on the planet. It's just a wild reminder of how much these massive fortunes are tied to the market's knee-jerk reaction to a single day's news.
And of course, when you have that level of wealth and access to cash, real-world influence isn't far behind. Sources have noted his political alliance with President Trump and his involvement in that big Stargate AI project. But he's also making some major moves in the media world. He funded his son's successful $8 billion bid to acquire Paramount, and he's also been positioned as a potential buyer for TikTok's U.S. operations. He's playing on a whole different level.
So after breaking all of that down, what's the big takeaway here? What's the crucial lesson from this absolutely incredible story?
It really comes down to a two-part recipe. First, you take one part perfect timing, capitalizing on the explosive market-moving trend of AI. Then, you combine that with one part long-term deliberate financial strategy. In this case, 15 years of stock buybacks that quietly and steadily increased his piece of the pie. It's like the spark of the AI boom ignited a massive pile of fuel that had been carefully gathered for over a decade.
And all of this leaves us with one last really fascinating question to chew on. What does this whole story really tell us about how the biggest fortunes are built today? Is it more about creating that groundbreaking, world-changing innovation we all hear about? Or is it more about mastering the quiet, methodical, but incredibly powerful tools of financial engineering? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.